I think you guys were onto something, and you clocked it to such a degree. It's one of the main reasons why I said I got to get these guys on. For 2 years, I feel as though the NFL media lied to me about Brock Purdy's contract. I felt completely misled by all these people who are theoretically experts on what's supposed to happen. Jake specifically, and I know because you credited him, predicted what the numbers would be exactly and the situation exactly. And for those who don't know, the Purdy was paid basically nothing because he was the last pick in the draft. And so when the Niners were doing well, there was this narrative that, hey, things are going great now, but when he gets paid, the party's over, people. It's going to be now you're not going to be able to afford any talent. It's going to be this huge issue. And so there are all these conversations for over a year about how this was the big looming sort of Damocles over the 49ers, and he's not worth it. He is worth it. But if you have an understanding of the NFL salary cap and how it works, his getting paid so little allowed them this mechanism to not pay him very much in terms of cap and really have over 90% of the rest of their cap devoted to other players. And this should have been completely foreseeable if you understood the NFL salary cap and you understood the situation. And I don't know what to make of it that for 2 years, everybody else in media told me a myth and you guys told me the truth. So what's up with
interesting.
That?
By the way, the extra money they had, they just sort of set on fire with, like Javon Hargrave and Malik Collins, guys that like just didn't pan out. So there's an argument to be said that, hey, just give it to the quarterback so you can't waste it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But I think it's very easy to say, oh, big money number, and then go on ESPN and say, oh, this guy's not actually very good. He's getting overpaid. When the reality of the numbers is much, much less. So all of these players are eventually going to come to get paid. And the way teams structure these deals is not like you have to pay $50 million up front. You can do that, but they all kick this money down the road, and it's funny money. And every single year, the cap goes up another $10 million. And so, as contracts get bigger, like teams can eat it more, and they have all these mechanisms to get crafty with all these ugly option bonuses and whatnot. But with the 49ers, even after signing Purdy, they have the second most amount of cap space in the league.
And one of the things that the Niners did, first off, to get to the initial premise, like it is not sexy or fun or particularly interesting to talk about the mechanisms that make up the NFL salary cap.
Okay, I'm just going to interject and give you a sexy premise then.
Great.
Is NFL media dumb? That's my premise. Is it dumb? Because I looked at this and it might be unfair.
It might be condescending, but it's not dumb.
Because I looked at this from the NBA media perspective, Dieter, and you tell me, because you've covered NBA, I don't think something like this would happen in NBA media. I think if there was an utterly foreseeable salary situation that had been discussed for 2 years, I feel as though NBA media would have covered that. And I don't know what to make of how NFL media was completely, I don't know if they were shocked by this outcome or not understanding it, that they just wouldn't see that coming, that it would actually just be less than 10% of the salary cap and NBD.
Maybe this will really play to your audience, Ethan. Maybe this will be the nail in my coffin. But inflation is crazy. People lose their minds about inflation because they're anchored to this concept of what things should cost. And when inflation happens in the real world, or in this case with quarterbacks, they cannot adapt. They just can't adapt. And it defined our country for like 2 years, and it's going to define the NFL for the next 10.
Okay, so that's part of it. There's a sticker shock aspect where it's, oh my God, Jimmy Garoppolo made something in the 20 millions and that was the most, and now this is more, so it must be too much. But this is a specific nerdy thing where the structure of how he was paid meant that how he would be paid would have such a lessened impact, and I don't understand how that could have just escaped any scrutiny.
And I think one thing is the NBA is all fully guaranteed. Right. So the money is what the money is. The NFL, it's however much teams guarantee, and agents tell you.
No one really knows. No one really knows. We have good data on this, like over the cap. does incredible work to provide this. And Mike Florio always has these great contract details, and like great local reporters do this sort of thing. And even then we're like, but they could be lying. Like, we don't know. Right. And there's so much
weird contract outs. And
it's deliberately, it's deliberately obfuscating of the actual outlay of money. Like, it deliberately does that as to, because of the ability to cut anyone at any time in the NFL is almost omnipresent, like not completely, but almost. And maybe save for quarterbacks. Because of that, you have to structure contracts in such a way that you can always, you're thinking of how to get out of it when you're writing up these contracts. And in the NBA, it's just like, no, 3 years or 4 years or 5. Like, there's a number, it goes up, you can get a certain percentage of the cap, all these things. Like, none of those rules apply in the NFL because the roster sizes are much larger, because the power still remains with the teams as opposed to the players, which I would argue is the case in every other sport, save for baseball, but that's a larger conversation. And the highest and the lowest end there. Like, so when we get in, we get the inflation aspect of things, and then we just get the fact that it's just difficult. They're coming up with new ways to break the rules every year. And Philadelphia and San Francisco, the Saints have been over the salary cap, Ethan, for like 7 straight years. Nothing has happened. No one quite knows how they're doing it, but Mickey Loomis just figures out a way to pay the tax bill every year. No one wants to dig down to it. So the idea that, the NFL is dumb, no, I think that there are a lot of people who know this, who find it probably too nerdy for the very large breadth. They're still casual fans in football. I'd argue it's the majority of fans of football are casual fans. Like, my mother-in-law watches football. Like, what? Like, I can't talk to her about the NBA or baseball or anything, but I can talk to her about the Seahawks because they live up in Seattle, and like, she's got takes. And in that, like, I just don't think that you can get into what a void here is and still be allowed on television or be rewarded by the algorithm or be on sports talk radio, because it's just not something that people want to hear, save for, like the 1,000 people that really like us.
That's the thing. It's the amount of context you have to introduce to explain what's actually happening takes away from the sexy argument, and then you're somewhere else.
Yeah. So it's not that NFL media is dumb. It's that there's just more complexity. And if NBA media had to swim in these waters, we would find them to be rather treacherous. At the same time, I do think the NBA perspective is different, and in a way helps you understand a quarterback contract situation better. That's how I felt about the whole Purdy thing, was that I had a very NBA media perspective on it. The NFL media perspective, it's almost morally infused. There's this sense of he shouldn't be making this much money. Right. It's ought over is. It's this, Cowherd said about Brock Purdy that he's making roughly what Josh Allen is making. That's debatable. We don't have to get into the nitty gritty, but let's just hypothetically pretend that was so.
Sure.
And that shouldn't be happening. And I looked at that from my NBA perspective, and I just said to myself, well, in the NBA, we're just used to the idea that an all-star level guy who's not a superstar is going to get a max contract, and you pay it because you can't replace him. Now, there isn't the max contract in the NFL, but it operates a little bit like that with the quarterbacks, where you just can't replace the guy. So you pay him whatever the going rate is, because most draft picks at QB flame out and fail, and that will be a 1 to 2 to maybe even 3 year experiment that completely gets everybody fired. And you're not going to spend the money generally on anybody else, because the NFL is structured in such a way similar to the NBA, where you keep your very best players so they're never on the market. So the free agency market actually isn't that great. Nope. So you pay it because you can't replace it. And if it is the same amount as somebody who's regarded as the best player, then so what? That's just the going rate. There's nothing else really to do. And if Brock goes out there and sucks, or he gets injured or whatever, the problem isn't that you paid him the contract. The problem is that he sucks. That's the problem. So I had moved past this whole conversation in a way in my own mind that was almost maybe one of the top 4 topics in the NFL the last 2 years.
Right. It's interesting because you mentioned sort of the morality aspect of it. And that's something that's, at least from my perspective, tied to player empowerment. Like, oh, he deserves that money. He deserves that. And this level of he deserves it. But the other, and that does apply to quarterbacks. It doesn't apply to any real other position, save for the highest of the high end level. We had this a little bit with Brandon Ayuk, and if he should be a $30 million receiver.
There should have been more of the high dudgeon annoyance towards Ayuk and that contract and what's happened, but nobody cares.
And I did for a month. And we disagreed.
He's like a quiet guy who's just out of nowhere is just like, I'm going to go scorched earth for no reason against my own well-being.
Well, that was very
I'll say
NBA.
this as my is versus ought. He's not good enough to be acting that way. He's just not. And it's annoying, and he should stop it. And people in local media should say so. They should just say, look, you're not good enough to be acting this way. But yes.
Yeah. You can't get recognized on the street, young man. I'm pretty sure that you cannot be acting a fool like this all the time. But that's for him and his people to figure out. The second aspect of what you said earlier is the most interesting part to me, which is, I don't think anyone, at least when we talk about this on a macro journalism scale, and in particular in this just sort of I want to have a sports debate aspect of things, like I think that a lot of people like the concept, or they like to operate in this hypothetical of like, oh, well, they should move on from Brock Purdy, and then they should get a different core. They should go QB 0, right? They should go from somebody else because he's not worth the money, so we should go. And you forgot the whole part about how lucky they got to get Brock Purdy in the first place, and how Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch only have their jobs with the 49ers because Brock Purdy was drafted last on a whim, and that they had already had pick number 3, that they traded 3 first-round picks for in Trey Lance. And he was awful to the point where I'm not even sure what football team he's on anymore. And this is their careers. This is their livelihoods. John Lynch isn't getting another GM job after this. He's working for Amazon. And Kyle might just be an offensive coordinator again, or have to, go to the backwaters of the NFL and try to drudge something up there. He might have to go work for Washington again in a couple of years. Like, he's not doing that. And so ridiculous.
I need an acronym for what you're talking about, because I brought this up on Guy Haberman's podcast, and I know Grant Cohn. I like Grant. I think he's got a talent. I don't know how to define what that talent is.
Gets the people going.
It gets the people going. But he was saying that he would roll with Mac Jones and draft Shedeur Sanders and go that way when they were talking about the contract, or the contract was just done. And I need some sort of acronym for you wouldn't do that if it was your job on the line.
Well, it's just internet brain algo thinking. Like, if he would have picked a different quarterback, I'd have a little bit more respect for that take. But he picked the most popular one, the one who somehow would get the most clicks for him, because Shedeur Sanders has some sort of undeniable but also undefinable hold over the populace. He's somebody that people talk about, and it has now perpetuated itself. It's just cycled to where I don't even know why we're doing this anymore. And
I'll allow that there's a universe where that's the right choice. Sure. I'll allow that there is some chance Mac Jones has had one good season. Who knows? Maybe if you rolled him out there and you had Sanders as the backup, Mac Jones would flourish. Then again, you'd come right back to the same difficult decision making of, do you pay this guy? Right. There's a chance that's the right choice. It's just never going to be the choice that you make when it's your job on the line.
I think with Brock in particular, there's an obsession with where he was drafted and his size that just makes any calculus for him really difficult.
Draftism.
So I think people attach themselves to his stock and his limited arm talent. And when he's not elite, it makes it tough to say, all right, you should pay him however much it is.
Yeah, I think there's an anchoring. I'm fascinated by draftism, the worst bigotry there is. We try to eradicate it, but it's just with us always. We can't do much. We were never getting rid of it, which is interesting. It's weird. It's just, why don't we prioritize? Yeah, but it's weird. If somebody's doing what they're doing, why don't we just care about what they're doing on the pro level? And yet, and I've seen it across sports. I've seen it go the other direction. Michael Beasley kept getting cup of coffee after cup of coffee in the NBA.
Surely not all
pick.
People could be wrong. And there's another aspect to this, and this is maybe the real anchor point. Like, so Brock has been successful. He is 25 years old, and he has led a team to the Super Bowl. And you can say that was everybody else, but like, what has Jordan Love done besides pissed off his coach, made the Packers feel like they're I don't think Matt LaFleur likes.
I mean, he makes some pretty cool passes when he's backpedaling. Totally. That backpedal pass he does is pretty sweet.
Jordan Love is to this point theoretical, right? And he could be totally sick, but he is to this point theoretical. His contract is almost identical to Purdy's. And there's a lot of other contracts that are sort of in that ballgame. Would it have been better for Brock to have maintained as a hypothetical? It's like a Schrodinger's cat thing. Like, would it have been better for him to have never been on the field, or to show a couple of warts on top of all of the great things that he does, and to be somewhat of a finished product, to have this high floor instead of this theoretical high ceiling? I don't know what the right answer is. It doesn't really matter because they got the same money, and I would much rather be a team that's trusting Brock Purdy than Jordan Love. And I think that Matt LaFleur...
are out on Jordan Love. I kind of like Jordan Love. You are.
We all love the
LaFleur
theory of Jordan
shots
Love
at him
until he needs to beat the Eagles in the playoffs, and then what happens?
But look at what Mahomes looked like against the Eagles. I mean, I'm not anti Jordan Love, but I did enjoy when Purdy and Love went against each other in that rainy slop playoff game. And it did feel a little bit like that meme of the flirting versus harassment, where the things that Purdy did in that game that didn't work out well had people up in arms, to the point where even though there was a fourth quarter game-winning drive in the rain where every decision had to be right and every decision was right, the narrative was still infused with this skepticism, and Jordan Love, who was horrific in the second half and almost couldn't be worse in the fourth quarter, and people were going very excited for the future of Jordan Love, very excited.
As if Jordan Love's not like 27 years old. You know,
well, it's interesting that some analysts, like, they're really smart people, but then they just resort to arm talent. They're like great at everything, but they're like, arm talent is everything. Yeah. But it's like, you don't understand, like, understanding how to play quarterback actually really matters. That's why Tom Brady made it before he like worked on his game and got better physically. Like, I mean, it's understanding how to play.
Ben Joyce of the Angels can throw at 104 miles per hour. Why isn't Ben Joyce the best pitcher in baseball?
I actually think the baseball,
UCL, but like there's something there.
Yeah, but I think the baseball argument might undermine you a little bit because it's a little different. Baseball, I think, has gone more towards it's just velo, it's just power, and because the weird thing with pitchers is that they're actually a little less in control of where the ball goes than we might think. Kyle Bodie, is that the way they pronounce his name? He's been on my show. I should know it, but that's his whole thing, that they can't actually, they don't actually know where it's going. So the stuff is the thing that actually matters. And we like the romantic idea of Maddox painting corners, but that's just not as attainable as we might think. And maybe with the way hitters are, it gets tagged a little more than we want to admit. But quarterback is just different. You're the conductor of this entire orchestra. Correct. And that's why I think it might be a little overvalued, because there's so much other stuff versus for a pitcher, it's what's the sign? Me throw ball there, throw ball there.
I mean, but to my point, like, I think it's going off of what Hutch was saying in the sense of, if you're going to just keep defaulting to arm talent, you're missing the point of it all, in that you, especially too in a modern NFL where defenses are doing more disguising than ever, they're more dynamic than ever, they're faster than ever. The idea of just being able to go out there and, oh, there's the Mike linebacker, everyone shift to the right on the line and everything's going to be A-okay, we don't have to adjust anything, or I don't need to run away at all, I can just stand here. Like, all of that is gone. And yes, arm talent is awesome, because if if your read fails you and your feet fail you, you can still maybe get it into that tight little window. But I'm going to go with the read first, your feet second, and then your ability to zip it in between seven dudes last if I'm trying to figure out how to win a football game, because turnovers, I know every coach says it. It's to the point it's so cliche that you just don't even think it's true anymore. But like, if you win the turnover battle, you usually win the game. So this is where I think Brock really gets demerits from the general public. And I don't think they're necessarily wrong about this. They can only go off the information they're getting. Brock's best throws have come in like the Fox 315 window, right? Like his throw against Seattle to Brandon Ayuk between four dudes is like an all-time rip. No one saw that because it was a divisional game, like mid-season. And when he's in big games, he doesn't have that signature awesome moment. He just looks absolutely like a good starter, positive, all this stuff. But like his defining moment, I would argue, as a quarterback, his highlight involved the ball bouncing off of a Detroit Lions player first. So
that's what inflated Brandon Ayuk's ego and turned him full diva mode. But continue.
It was a pretty sick catch. Let's be clear about that. Yeah. And he did come back in the NFC Championship game to win it. But like it will always be attributed to other people because it's not very YouTube friendly. Because you need the full 60 minutes to understand what Brock's doing and how he controls the game.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think it's a lot of anchoring. I think it's a lot of anchoring. It's a lot of draftism and maybe needing more moments. I think just he needs to have more moments. He needs more successful drives. I think he has a signature. His signature is a layered throw over the linebacker. Yeah. That's what he does, but it's not defined.
It's also not cool.
I think it's
cool. You and I think it's cool. Jake, I know, thinks it's cool. Jake's like, he can hardly contain himself. But like, you know what's really cool? Jordan Love ripping it 70 yards past a safety who's flat-footed. Like that is really cool, and it looks good on TikTok.
Is cool. I mean, it is cool when he's going backwards and the ball goes forwards. It's pretty cool.
It's and one versus John Stockton. Like it is a little. Maybe that's a bad analogy. I know I'm coming to the master of analogies here, but like. At the same time, like the flash versus the substance. Substance is what coaches care about. Flash is what fans care about. Neither of them are wrong, but only one of them has millions of dollars riding on the outcome of the game.
Well, I didn't intend to turn this into Purdy propaganda, but I do think that if something's defined, it can be understood. And if there was some sort of, that's his play, that's what he does, then that gets more understood. And then people go, oh, that's what this guy is about. And reputations can change. With him, I am zen. With Purdy, I just go, look, I'm concerned about the injuries. I'm concerned about the arm getting hurt. He might flame out. And if it happens, it happens. And if he keeps doing it, then he will get his respect because that, and I'm not saying that Purdy is like Steph Curry, or he's going to have a career like Steph Curry, to be clear. But that is what happened with Steph Curry, where there were so many more doubts than anybody is ever going to admit now. And so much more questioning. And the whole way through, there were questions at the beginning of, is this guy better than Ty Lawson when they're going against the Nuggets? And then it goes into, is he a superstar? Then is he the best player? Then it just goes that way. And when I was in my 20s, I felt like I had to fight all those battles on the internet and argue for the reputation of an athlete. And now you just go, I've got my opinion, and whatever will happen, will happen.
Yeah, and I think when there's gray area, with Purdy not being a top 5 guy, people struggle. People don't understand, like, what's this middle ground that's like good but not perfect, right? Where he's small and his arm's not elite, but he's pretty good. I don't understand that, and I don't know how to get into the nitty gritty because it's not straightforward.
By the way, Russ Wilson existed in this realm for decades, and there's so many similarities, which almost lends itself then to the argument that a lot of people have made, bringing it back to maybe the initial topic, which is, well, Seattle fell apart once they gave Russ all the money, and perhaps that was a structural issue of keeping all the great defensive players and paying them, but they decided to pay the quarterback. There's also the locker room issue of losing the Super Bowl, which did not happen with the 49ers, it should be noted. So maybe that's where the branches split. But also the NFL has dramatically changed in terms of the financial ramifications since then. And you can get away with, quote unquote, overpaying a quarterback now more than ever, which is perhaps why so many quarterbacks seem overpaid. You can still do it. Whereas back then, the quarterback was taking up more of a percentage of the salary cap at its high end than it does now. Brock Purdy, and Jake and I have talked about this a million times. Brock Purdy is making the equivalent of what Jimmy Garoppolo is making. When we talk about percentage of the salary cap, and that's, by the way, with the 49ers not even using all of the salary cap in both of those cases. So it is a gray area thing, which then, there's nuance, and it's going to be, in a world that demands binary thought, it's not a very fun place to be. I mean, it's fun for us to talk about, but then it also then just brings people back to what you were saying earlier, the anchoring, the draftism, the how is he getting away with this energy, and constant. And because there's no binary answer, people just seem constantly forced, or they feel constantly forced to have to reprove the point that they made 5 years ago. They can't get off of their initial premise because there's not clear enough evidence, not obvious enough evidence to move them on from it. And that just sounds exhausting and kind of sad.